Good afternoon for those who've joined the webinar. We're just going to give a couple of more minutes before we commence at 33 minutes past. So I'll go back to mute and then we'll kick off shortly. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us on this webinar to walk through the Open Networks 2019 work plan. My name is Jason Brogden. I'm the project director here at ENA, and I'm going to lead off with some material at the beginning and wrap up with some material at the end, and then hand over to some colleagues to talk through some of their areas as we go through. Engagement are on this front slide. If you can please ensure you're switched to mute to avoid background noise, that helps everybody. And please ask questions via the Q&A function rather than the chat function, and we'll try and address as many of these as possible at the end of the presentation. And also we've got a couple of points where we're going to pause as we go through. Just a couple of reminders on this front slide, a link to the consultation itself, and a reminder that consultation closes on the 22nd of February and our contact details for sending in responses. So thank you all for joining us, and just to give you a summary of presentation is not going forwards. There we go, sorry. Give you a summary of the proceedings. As I say, I'm going to cover off them. We have workstream leads from the workstreams we go through: Ian Povey from ENW, Jim Harwell from MPG, Stewart Reed from SSEN, and Mark Herring from National Grid. And then we'll wrap up at the end. We're going to try and leave 2 slots for questions, one 5-minute slot in between the work streams, another 5-minute slot in between work streams, and then 10 minutes at the end. So if you can please use the Q&A facility to ask questions. If you do have questions to go along, we'll try and capture them and cover them as we go through. So just a bit of a background to the Open Networks project again. Many of you will be very familiar with the project. It's an initiative looking to transform how we work as network operators, customers, as part of the smart grid transition. And particularly we're looking at how we help customers connect and realize value, as well as looking at some of the issues and actions out of government policy, the German-based Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, Industrial Strategy, and the Clean Growth Plan. And the approach that we're taking is learn by doing. There are a number of tenders for flexibility services at the moment. There are a number of trials underway and planned for the future, so that we actually look at how we can best discharge of the transmission and distribution economies and some of the process improvements for customers. So we're very much taking that learn by doing approach as part of the project. Collaborating members are all of the transmission owners, distribution network operators within the ESO, within GB, as well as Northern Ireland Electricity Networks and ESBN from Ireland. We also have the INO GTC engaging and collaborating as members of the EA. But this doesn't give the whole picture of our stakeholder engagement. All of you on the call now and others through our newsletter and our advisory group are engaging and providing input as we go through the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about stakeholder engagement at the back end of the presentation. And there is an opportunity for all of you to provide input into our approach and techniques for stakeholder management. Just to recap on where we've come from and where we're going, we've now moving into our third year with Open Networks, and we've gone through a number of definition and principal activities. We've gone through some assessment around distribution system operator and looking at improvements through the connections process and information provision, amongst others. And we are running through evidence-based building for policy decisions and implementation of some of those changes we've defined through the early phases of the programme. And beyond this year, we're looking at how we enact those through regulation and implementation and how we interact with RIIO-2 process. And it's really important for us to remind ourselves of the benefits we're seeking to give to the public, the social benefits of keeping costs down and ensuring we deliver a secure and reliable electricity network, and also providing more opportunities to existing and new businesses to both connect and make use of the technology that they have connected to the distribution and transmission networks. So this is just a bit of background on where we've come from, where we're going, and a reminder of the consumer benefits. To cover our consultation, the purpose of our consultation is to consult on our work plan and what we've set out as our delivery programme for this year to deliver against our objectives. What we've done is we have established our project to be adaptable. So this consultation very much is an opportunity for everybody to provide their feedback on our priorities and our work plan for this year. We'll present that back to our steering group and we will tailor our plan of work accordingly. We did that this year. You said you wanted more consultation time. You said you wanted more direct feedback, and we incorporated that into our processes last year. So please do respond back to consultation, because we do listen and we do change off the back of it. On how we've derived the 2019 work plan, there are a number of inputs into our scope and plan of work. I'm not going to read all of them out, but some of the key areas are the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, which I highlighted earlier. The continuation of the work that we were doing last year, both in terms of continuing the development work and implementation of the completed products that we did, and we're going to talk a bit about implementation later. We will take into account your consultation feedback, are taking into account the developments Stewart will talk to later as part of the DSO transition from our roadmap and least regrets from our analysis around distribution system operator. So a lot of contributing factors, as well as your opportunity to feedback to our consultation on what we're doing. This slide shows how we've structured our work and how we've continued the development work from last year. And there are two main sort of areas in the right-hand side for our development work at the top here. We have separated out short-term improvements from the longer-term DSO transition elements. And the reason for that is for us to keep a focus on making improvements now. We tried a number of changes in transmission and distribution processes last year, which we're now monitoring through to implementation. There's further improvements that we want to make around transparency of information and other things, which Jim and others will talk about a bit later. But what we want to do is make sure we're learning from that least regrets analysis and making change now to make improvements. And we're not just focusing on this longer-term delivery of DSO transition. So that's why we've split that out and have 3 work streams identified in those short-term improvements, so that we've got a manageable scope for each of those work streams. We had last year a workstream on charging. That is now being subsumed into the development work that's being done by Ofgem under the SCR. So we don't have a separate open networks workstream on charging, but it's a very key dependency for a lot of our activities. And we have a new workstream at the bottom, the whole energy systems workstream, which Mark is going to talk about a bit later. So I won't steal his thunder by talking through that now. Governance model is very similar to last year. We've got more work streams along the bottom, we will see. And we have a much stronger definition of our dependencies out from those work streams. So we've actually highlighted a number of key initiatives that we have dedicated resource monitoring and providing input, particularly around some of the trials, the significant code review, and the energy data task force. So we've identified some of those key dependencies and allocated specific resource to make sure that we are monitoring and providing input and output. One of the key things we want to come back from the consultation is just some feedback from all of you on what our key priorities should be. And we've highlighted 3 areas of key priorities in this slide. Open flexibility markets, progressing that long-term pathway to future DSO, and concentrating on implementing those least regret short-term changes. We do need to ensure that we focus on our key priorities. I think that all of industry recognises there's a lot of parallel activities going on at the moment, calling on similar resources. We have set out what we believe is an achievable body of work in here, and we have prioritised accordingly. But I think it is really important for us to ensure that we're focusing on what the key priorities are for us and also for all our stakeholders. So there are a number of questions in the consultation about key priorities. If you can pick out 2 or 3 key priorities out of everything that you want us to concentrate above all else, then please do that. And I would ask you to do that, because that means that we're ensuring that we concentrate on the most important things if we have conflicts. Okay. Consultations is a bit of a challenge for us, because we want to consult as much as possible to get your feedback through the programme, but we're very conscious of stakeholder fatigue, of the volume of consultations that are out there in industry, both from us and from others. So what we've done this year is we've allocated 1 consultation per quarter as what we think is a good balance for stakeholders. We can increase that, can reduce that, but we would appreciate your views on what consultations we should be taking out. There are a number of products within the PID, particularly in the flexibility services workstream, actually, where we've identified we could consult on those, but at the moment we've constrained ourselves to 4 to make that a manageable volume. Please do provide us with your feedback on whether you think that's appropriate, whether we should do more, or you'd rather see less of us given the volume of other consultations out there. So that's a really important element of your feedback, making sure that we're striking that right balance. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop intro and tour. And now the focus is to look at the individual work streams themselves and some of the content of those work streams. And we're going to start with work stream 1A, which is flexibility services. And we separated out flexibility services this year so that we can actually concentrate on learning from some of the tenders that are out there and concentrate on flexibility, whereas it was much of that development work last year was wrapped into work stream 3 on DSO transition. By separating this out into its own work stream, we can concentrate on making short-term improvements and making best use of good practice across all of the procurements that are happening at the moment. So set out a sort of left to right picture here of how DSO services progress. So identifying system needs and identifying the products on the left, and now making those service needs visible out to the market, going through the procurement process and selection before dispatch and settlement of those services. And that is a focus on services that we are procuring as DSO. So that is looking at direct services procured by DSOs out to the market. The 4 active power services we looked at last year, but this year also looking at how we develop more. So those green boxes in the middle are talking about directly procured DSO services. What we're also doing as part of the flexibility services work stream this year is also looking at how we can facilitate other markets, whether it's peer-to-peer or trading of access behind a constraint, whether it's trading of curtailment. What we're going to do is we are going out to look at what markets might exist and how we might support that with additional information provision. So we're going to look at some of the use cases later this year, building on principles and some of the processes that we set out to see what else we might be able to do to support other markets. Reflected in our deliverables for this year. So right up front, we're going to look at what principles we should be embedding in flexibility markets, and then looking through those processes for procurement and dispatch and settlement. We've looked at system needs and products for active power. We're now going to look at procurement and dispatch. We're also going to look at commercial arrangements. Are there any opportunities for common commercial arrangements, either for contract length or for terms and conditions? What is there that is good practice that we can embed in across all DSO contracts so that customers have some consistency in how they're providing services in for DSO. So again, this is around convergence and standardization. We're going to ensure that we try and identify areas where there's conflict and we're managing and optimizing as part of DSO service provision. And then deliverable 6 at the bottom there is that facilitation of new markets. That's the non-directly procured DSO services, and that's the analysis we're going to do in the second half of this year once we've built that basis of principles and landing of the processes. So, and I've got a question on the right there. At the moment, we've just got the market principles being consulted on. If you'd like us to publicly consult on more than that, let us know in your responses back to consultation. It might mean that we then have more, but if that's what's needed in order to get the necessary input, then please let us know. And we are going to be engaging with stakeholders all the way through the development of this work. It's not going to be just dumping it at the end in a big consultation. We'll use our advisory group. We'll use our connection steering group as identified in the governance slide and other stakeholders where we can. There's already been base convened workshops with potential market providers, and we'd like to continue engaging with stakeholders. This just reinforces some of the learn by doing principles. These are some of the examples of the flexibility projects that are out there now that we're building on as part of our work. So I'll hand at this point to Ian Povey, and I hope that the audio flicks across appropriately to him to work through workstream 1B. Ian.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I'll crack on then. I'm Ian Povey. I'm the manager for Electricity Northwest in my day job, and also I'm the Workstream 1B lead. Workstream 1B is looking at system planning and data exchange between transmission and distribution. The 4 products. You want to move the slide forward? The products within Workstream 1B. Investment planning, whole electricity system FES, real-time exchange and forecasting, and data exchange in the planning timescales. Take them by one. Investment planning. This is really building on the work that we did last year. A lot of the work last year was looking at picking up learning from, one, the RDP work that's going on in UKPN and WPD, but also we did a voltage methodology case study where National Grid, who had issues with high volts on the network at periods of low demand, were looking for support for a solution from perhaps the DNOs in the area, which was Northern Power Grid and Electricity North West. That work progressed and flushed out an awful lot of issues, which is now being taken forward this next year. So we're looking to develop the thinking about how we price a distribution option consistent with a national grid option, because there are intricacies around that, because they're funded in different methods. So we're looking at how we view and judge them in a consistent manner. We're also looking at the funding options for DNOs and transmission, both now, whilst we're in the RIIO-1 period, when we're in what the funding options look like, and also in that transition period where the DNOs will still be under ED1 and the transmission will have moved on to T2. So we'll need some transition options to see how we can fund that work. Also, we're looking at what data we'll need to have exchange between transmission and distribution. And the data exchange will be, we'll have to judge with the other work, the products in the Open Networks Forum, so that we're not having inconsistent data exchanges or having to exchange data more than once. We'll be trying to make sure we've got a slick process. We'll also have to identify if there's any code changes required. And we'll be working with products 3-4 in workstream 1B to make sure that we will put together a consistent proposal for any code changes. What we also want to do is move forward, not just looking at the distribution and transmission options. We want to look at extending the case studies to look at testing the market to see if there are any distributed energy resource options to provide solutions for transmission stroke distribution problems. And we'll be looking for, I think National Grid are looking to put out a request for information going forward, and we'll be working with that request information and switching that into the work of Product 1. Product is whole electricity system FES. Looking to initially, the first bit is to pick up on last year's work and make sure that we can bring tactical improvements to the National Grid 2019 FES. So we don't, as the 2019 process already started, we don't can bring fundamental changes in at this point, but we're looking to see from the learning last year's work what tactical changes we can bring in. We'll then move on to work out what we need to make for a more permanent changes to the FES process, and that will be looking at to finalise templates for data exchange for the 2020 FES. Also need to see what impacts there will be on the codes and what code changes will be proposed. And again, we'll need to look at that with a round of all the other products within the open networks. Product, this is looking at real-time data exchange. This really building on the good work done in RDP, WPD and UKPN to find out they've already tested, what architectures they can use, and what we're trying to do now in this year's work is to say, well, in Extreme 3 there are a number of worlds. Will that change the architecture that we need to employ and the data that we need to exchange? So in that, we'll look at the forecasting. So what data do we need to exchange to allow forecasting? Not particularly the forecasting methodology, but what there is needed. And we're looking at the short term, which is up to 40 hours, and medium term, which is up to 3 weeks. After that, we're looking more at product 4. Will also be the the primary interface for with the TER project and the data requirements to facilitate the TER processing. The data exchange in planning timescales, product 4. We'll look to identify the complete range of data exchange in other products, but also as demanded by the system operation guidelines and statement of works which is going on separately, and there are code changes being proposed for those. So we want to make sure that we bring together all those changes in one proposal. And look, that's one element of it. The other element is to look at the data exchange mechanisms, whether we speed up the process by using common information models. We need to look at that and see what the options are for that. 5 is to put together a code change proposal for this and all the other products within workstream 1B and the other product and the other workstreams. I think that really sums it up for me, Jason.
Thank you. That is fantastic. We had a question in from Mike Kay on RDP and what RDP stands for, which is the Regional Development Programs. I don't have any other questions in as yet, Webster. We'll pause for a second to see if there are any questions in from the audience. Okay. Further questions, please do raise them in the Q&A and we'll pick them up at the next pause. But at this point, I'll hand over to Jim Carwell, MPG, to talk about Workstream 2. Jim.
Dave, if you like, but I'm all assisting with the work in Workstream 2 for open networks. So this workstream is really associated with 3 main objectives. One of them is about always for ways to provide short-term improvements to our connections processes. The second one is about sort of building on the work that's going on in some of the works you just heard Jason and Ian talk about. It's about recognising that if we can get information out there into the marketplace, we might be able to aid the development of flexibility markets for services other than those directly contracted by a DSO, but recognising that getting data out there is quite important. So I'll come back to that the theme when I go through the products in a minute. And the third one is really about help with information across that interface between transmission and distribution networks. So again, very much feeding on the same areas that which has been talked about. So Jason, if we can advance the slide, please, and thank you. So what we've got in 2018, I suppose, what you've got left to right here, at the very top here is in the blue, is various stages of applications really thinking about viewed from a connection. So as customers wish to connect to a network, be that transmission or distribution network, where it's about customers making their applications, they'll get an offer from a network. Then be if there's more than one customer in a particular area, those offers may be interactive in that stage after the offer's been put out there, but before acceptance. Then once accepted, if a customer wishes to proceed, you might then have some queue management issues you build out, and I'll return back to that in a minute. And then lastly, we're into the kind of the post-connection operational management phase. And in the green, you've got the different stages of capacity, bearing in mind a lot of the focus here is about maximising the utility of the existing capacity that's out there in the networks and doing that. So I won't read those out, but you can see what's going on there. And in the orange at the base of this slide is some hooks into some of the products that we put out in 2018. So a lot of 2018 was about setting out good practice and about identifying what we've already got going on, and where some of the opportunities might be for us to improve things or indeed to align some of our actions to assist customers in what we're doing. So that's the sort of the platform for where we're going forward on this year. So Jason, if you could advance to the product slide, please. Thank you. So we've got, I think, first thing out here, some themes from earlier in the presentation, where we've got some prioritisation here of what we're seeking to do with 3 primary products, and a bit of a shorter one at item 4, which is about really looking at where we're going with connection agreements. So, and also, I guess 2 things just to flag at this stage as well, that in the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, there's action in there on queue management and looking at storage and how it should be treated in a queue. And then it's through this work stream, through the queue management, that we're going to deliver on one of those actions. That's a sort of an important spotlight to place upon this. And also in queue management, it's one of those consultations that, Jason, you mentioned at the beginning, when you talked about the fact that we're seeking to consult for things that really matter and not overdo it, if you like. So that we're going to be consulting on queue management in Q3 is the current plan, albeit, as you can see on the slide, we are looking to bring forward that timing if at all possible. So we're just working through that at the moment. So it's in our baseline plan for Q3, but we're just seeing if we can advance that forward at all. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of those products. I'm not going to go through all of them because you can read about them in the document and ask any questions you want as well while we're on the line, I suppose. But Jason, if we could advance, please, to queue management and just talk about that. So on the slide, you see what is a nice orderly queue forming by virtue of the receipt of acceptances and projects getting to a queue. As can be the case, there might be a physical constraint on the network in a particular location. So there might be some, for example, you've got John through 4, which are above that, and 5, 6, and 7, which have got might wait for some reinforcement. On the right-hand side, you see then the consequence of that project 1 on the left-hand side. It's missed a milestone. There's been work done by the industry in the past to try and get some guidelines together that we can talk about milestones, so that we've got, I mean, this is all about fairness and efficiency. I'd offer those 2 criteria really, where we can reshuffle that pack, if you like. But the only change really is that job 1 where we're missing a milestone, so that one moves out, and project number 5 can then proceed. So we're not sterilising capacity. We're moving forward with connecting people and getting people away for those projects that are key to succeed. So this is where we've done a consultation. We did that, some of you may have responded in the Q1 of 2019 or even the back end of 2018. We're just going through those consultation responses now that period is closed, and that's going to help us with taking forward a view of and developing our minded to position, which is then what we're going to go out with to consultation again later in the year, and that's sort of Q3 or earlier if we can do it, period. So that's an important bit of work for this year. And as well as queue management, I just reflect on the interactivity, the other point in the process that we're reviewing the responses to that as well. And as I said, on queue management, that is where, if you think of that queue that you see there and that ways to optimize using those principles of fairness and efficiency and value to the system, this is where we really are looking to identify whether storage should be treated any differently to other customers in terms of its value to the system, and should it be promoted up the queue in any circumstances, and what would those circumstances be. So we asked some questions on that in the consultation, so we're just poring over those responses at the moment, but we expect to come forward with some information on that through the course of the year, and ultimately come with a minded to position on where we're thinking of going for consultation in Q3 or earlier. So Jason, advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. The first product of those 4, and the other one I wanted to mention, was this system-wide resource register. So those in following open networks will recognise this, because this is taking forward a product from 2018, where we were looking at, I guess, 2 main objectives for the product, and we set out what essentially a ambition we had, which were these kind of where we developed these tables that you see here. But it might be worth reflecting on why we're thinking of this and what value it might add. And it's really got 2-fold, really. One is that it provides information on resources that got out there that we're looking to do, that are connected to the system and can provide value, therefore, to that objective for this work stream, which is providing value to market and help to develop markets for flexibility. And secondly, insofar as there are customers waiting for system reinforcements or system improvements to take place to enable them to connect, we want to visibility of that as well, and do that in common format across transmission and distribution to also enable the transmission distribution interface. So it's got a number of different components there of why we're doing it, but we're moving for this year with coming forward with suggestions of how we can actually do that and move it from, if you like, the drawing board into implementation. So looking at creating some kind of central register for that and looking through a number of the practicalities of doing that in a coherent way, an efficient way, and a legitimate way that appropriately answers all the sort of data confidentiality when we need to, and we can move forward on that. So that's the piece of work we're doing there. So I just wanted to cover off those two because I think they were two of the key products, queue management and system-wide resource register. But you can get a feel there for what we're seeking to undertake. So at that point, Jason, I might just hand back to you, I think.
Thank you. And I will very quickly hand across to Stewart Reed from SSEN to cover workstream 3. Stewart.
Thanks for that, Jason. Just advance to the next slide. So I'm Stewart Reed. I'm the head of DSO and innovation at SSEN, and I also look after workstream 3. I'm just going to start off by kind of following through the journey where we've been in this workshop so far. So we'll go right back to 2017. We had the DSO definition and functions were defined. We had the commercial principles paper that was consulted on, and then we moved on to the development of a SGAM, which is Smart Grid Architectural Model. So that the models have been produced, and we consulted on which sort of worlds we should be modelling as part of that process. And we also identified some of the key enablers for that transition to occur. So, through that process, we end up with the reasonably well-known world now. So you've got worlds A through to E that have been a common feature of a number of the consultations and events that we've run over the last few months. So where we are is we're continuing to refine the SGAM model and the key enablers, and we've been undertaking an impact analysis with Beringa. It's an independent impact analysis that they've been doing, and they're due to report on that. That kind of leads us into where we're going to next. So I'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing we've been doing that as well as the impact and assessment is also a least regrets analysis, so we can identify those elements that are common to all the worlds and they'll be required irrespective of which route we go. And that's, I suppose, an indication of our desire to keep this moving and actually make some real difference on the ground, as opposed to waiting for every T to be crossed and I to be dotted before we make any moves in the direction of becoming a DSO enabled country. In terms of moving to now, we've got the outputs. Ultimately, the aim is to get to a stage where we've got a number of outputs available that will help to make up the evidence pack that DBASE and Ofgem will need to make some of the key decisions about where we go from here on. And the other key bit we've got coming up is the impact assessment. So if we move to the next slide, please, Jason. Yep. Right, this is the plan for this year that we're consulting on. So just breaking down some of the key pieces. I've already mentioned about the impact assessment which Beringa have been doing. So one of the first pieces of work there is to undertake an analysis of that work, develop a consultation document, and basically get that out there so we can get views and opinions on the work that's been done on that impact analysis. So the plan is to have an 8-week consultation period starting in early March. And part of that, during that consultation period, will be analysing the gaps in the future worlds models that have been highlighted to date, and also those that are highlighted as part of the impact assessment. One of the other things we did as well as part of the Beringa work is we did a piece of work to look at the potential conflicts of interest and unintended consequences that are emergent from some of the models, in fact all of the models to some extent. So now we've done that piece of work, it's about understanding in more depth what these unintended consequences look like and what differences it would make to the way we'd want to set about designing these different worlds. So it's basically feeding that feedback into the process and making sure that we've got an SGAM model that is living and is going to genuinely inform the direction of travel that we're taking in this transition. The other piece we're going to be doing is consolidating the future world characteristics, and this work is going to be based on the consultation findings that I just mentioned there, but also inputs from projects like the TEF projects, which is the 3 milestone NIC funded projects that are getting underway at the moment. So they're key projects that will be taking outputs from open networks, but also inputting to the open networks project to help to consolidate things like the future worlds models and characteristics. So again, a big piece of work there as well. We're also continuing to identify key enablers and the decisions required from Ofgem and BASE, so that can be part of the handover as part of the evidence pack at the end of the process. And again, that will be looking at identifying, if you like, the impacts that have been identified as part of the consultation, also considering things like how we interface home and management systems, consumer access devices, how we'd interact with Internet of Things, cybersecurity and the likes. So it's about starting to broaden out the scope of this and start to understand what sort of enablers would be necessary to allow these worlds to actually kick off and start to become a reality. Now, the other we're going to be doing within the plan, you'll remember, hopefully from the early stages, we had a transition roadmap developed. So now, given the amount of work that's been done in the interim, taking input from TEF, the consultations, the development of the world, we're going to be revisiting that and updating the roadmap to provide clarity and, if you like, a fresh view of the timelines and when we believe certain changes will become visible and when key decisions need to be made along the way in this transition. And a couple other things we'll be doing, identifying further worlds, trials. So, on the basis of the feedback, the consultation, and the other inputs we've got, we'll be looking at what gaps we have. So obviously I've mentioned already we have the TEF projects, which have been set up to test and develop and demonstrate aspects of the different worlds that are in the programme. What we want to do is identify, is there any other work we need to do in terms of trials and developments to fill any other gaps that remain round about that, so that we're kind of a step ahead of ourselves rather than get at the end of this and finding we don't have the tools to actually allow us to implement the systems that we said we were going to be putting in place. And finally, there's a bit of further modelling work to identify, future worlds that could be effectively hybrids of the ones that we have at the moment. When the impact assessment comes out, one of the expectations we have is that there may be opportunities to pick and choose based on the feedback aspects of different worlds that have pros and cons against each other, and that will require us to then revisit some aspects of the future worlds modelling work that's been done and effectively possibly hybridise aspects of them so that we might end up with a transition that's understood and deliverable. So a fairly beefy amount of work to be done there, but the theme is consolidating, identifying the gaps, filling the gaps through informed trials and demonstrations, and also working towards encompassing the consultation feedback that we've been getting throughout the process. So, Jason, next slide. I'll sort of sum up there in terms of the key dates for this year's programme. I'm not going to read these out. You can hopefully see them on the screen, but it gives you an indication of the date ranges that we're targeting for each of the components of the programme. So hopefully that covers it. I don't know if there's anything else, Jason, you'd want to point out.
No, I think that's a very good summary of what's set out in the HID document, Stuart. So thank you for that.
Brilliant.
Just pause a minute again, just to take questions after those streams. Alessandra posted a question around flexibility services, and are we fitting in with the tender trials that are already being undertaken? First thing I'd say is that these aren't really trials, they're real procurements. So we are contracting flexibility services as a group of DNOs for DSO, so that's really good news. As I've said in my reply, we are taking the learnings from those into the development of good practice. I mean, the DNO tenders, DSO tenders are continuing throughout the year, so there'll be a continual improvement loop on that as we go through. So we are learning what from those procurement processes, what the market principles should be. We have the active power services that we defined last year, and we're seeing some convergence across the DNOs in using those active power services this year. So I think we're starting to already see the benefits of convergence and standardization, and particularly using common platforms gives customers an easier path to sell their services for DSO services. So the answer is yes, we are learning by doing as we're going through this, and I think we're already seeing the evidence of that. Question, Helen, on will the Baringa IA still be out for consultation in March? I'm going to go further than Stewart and saying early March. We are targeting March the 6th on that. Realise that's the day before the advisory group for some of you who attend that. But that is our target release date, and we are on target for that at the moment, he said, touching lots of wood and crossing all of his fingers and toes. So yes, the intention is for that to be out in March. It will be published in full as an independent impact assessment, and we've got a consultation wrapper that asks some key questions around that impact assessment to give you all the opportunity to provide input. So yes, Helen, we are still on target, and we've, if I think, brought that forward to the beginning of March. At what stage will product 1 be integrated into workstream 3, particularly conflicts of interest and market principles? As last year, there are lots of different ways to cut our products in this programme. We could well have put market principles across all of them, probably. There are dependencies between the work streams on market principles. I mean, we will be embodying, for example, the principle of neutral market facilitation as always through all of this. So, yes, any findings on the market principles in product 1 and workstream 1A will feed into workstream 3. And again, we will be consulting on that product so that you'll all have the opportunity to provide your input into that. So there are a number of dependencies we've identified between the work streams as well as externally. Please keep posting your Q&As and we'll pick them up at the end. We should have some time at the end. But at this point, I'm going to hand it to Mark Herring to cover the whole energy systems work stream.
Great, thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. Mark Herring. So, in my day job, I lead up the strategy team and the system operator, and I have recently been working with Jason and the team here on the whole energy systems workstream 4. So, it's as Jason mentioned earlier at the start of the webinar, this is a new workstream. There's not a huge amount of work done to date, but what I will do today is give a brief overview of what we've done to date and what we see the next steps as being, and how we'd like you to feedback what we'd like from you as stakeholders through this consultation. So the work to date, well, the workstream itself came about from stakeholder feedback last year, asking the Open Networks program to broaden its views across vectors and consider the whole energy system. And so over the last 2 months or so, we've been conducting a scoping exercise, and we're about halfway through that. And what we're looking at is where we can focus our efforts over the coming year and how these efforts can really deliver benefit to consumers. So what we've done, we've discussed and confirmed the scope of we believe we should be focusing on when we say whole energy, recognizing that whole energy can be a very broad scope or relatively narrow, and where we're focusing on is issues and projects that cut across both gas and electricity networks, and ideally cutting across both transmission and distribution as well. We see that as leveraging the greatest value from bringing together all of the members in the room, and recognise that scope can probably will grow beyond networks in the future, and we're really keen to involve and engage non-network companies and perspectives in the work stream. We've already had a lot of early engagement from key organisations across the sector, and we're looking to increase that as we clarify the scope of the work stream. To date, we've an initial mapping exercise. We've identified 3 big areas of challenges and opportunities that we think the work stream can focus in on. The first one is data and exchanging data. So there are basically 2 areas of that. First is sort of looking at workstream 1D and taking inspiration from that and seeing where there are opportunities to broaden this thinking across electricity and gas. So it might be thinking around the data exchange work and whole system fares, that sort of thing. The second element of data exchange which we're considering is what consumer benefit could be driven through sharing data between network companies, and we see a strong link and build upon the work of the Energy Data Task Force and the engagement we've had with that program to date. So we'll be exploring where the opportunities are there. Second area is around connections processes and planning for connections across fuels and networks. So again, 2 areas that we've scoped there. The first one looking about how networks can share forward planning information to optimize the capacity across networks and provide value to customers who want to connect to networks for energy wherever they want to connect. The second one is exploring the connections process from the customer perspective and looking to see whether we can find any opportunities to improve that process and that experience for customers. And the third big area of work that we've sort of scoped up is in recognition that whole energy is a broad and nebulous topic. So taking 2 lenses to understanding where the big areas of opportunity are across the piece. The first lens being customers, stakeholders, and a segmentation of the landscape. Which parties and technologies impact and are impacted by whole energy issues the most, so that we can really engage with those players in the market and understand what the issues are and where the opportunities are. And the lens being operability issues across both gas and electricity systems, and understanding where the big challenges and opportunities are from an operability lens as these systems become increasingly interlinked. And we're also looking at how we can share this way of thinking and this knowledge across network companies so that it's not just this work stream that's thinking in a whole energy way, but we're opening up the communication channels and the knowledge sharing across companies. So those are the 3 buckets, of thinking that we've identified so far. The work stream is in a very early stage, and our next steps are to really hone in on and scope up potential projects and work products for the coming year. So we're looking at a high level, what is the challenge, what's the work that we could undertake, and what is the consumer benefit that we could drive and deliver through doing that work. And to reiterate on consumer benefit, we're looking at how can we lower energy bills, how can we improve reliability, safety of the networks, how can we deliver environmental benefit, and how can we improve service to customers and stakeholders across the industry. So in terms of the consultation, we'd love you to look at question 7 is the whole energy one, and share your ideas on where you think we can add the most value by focusing our work for the next year, and who can get involved in that to make it. So that's where we're at for workstream 4. I'll pass back to Jason for the last piece.
Excellent. Thank you. Hopefully that gives everyone a good feel for our new area of work on whole energy systems. The last designated work stream that we have is around communications and stakeholder management, and obviously that's particularly of importance to all of you on the line because we are looking to maintain our level of stakeholder engagement, our level of consultation, and to keep people both informed outwards but also with the opportunity to provide input inwards into our programme of work. I'm not going to run through this line by line, but we are looking to continue to keep up a presence in events and communications out. We have set fact sheets now that we have available out of OpenWorks. We have our 2018 review that looks back on our achievements of last year. So we have a number of and we have our animations that we've been renewing as well centrally. So we have a set of collateral that hopefully will help you all understand and communicate to other people in your organisations that aren't as close to this as you are, maybe, what we're trying to do and how we're seeking to deliver benefits for customers. So there are a number of activities in there, as well as our classic stakeholder management activities through our governance model, with the advisory group providing input to our development work on a 2-monthly basis. So that's continuing. So I'm conscious of time to give some time to people to ask some questions at the end as well. But I think the communications is broadly set out here. The thing I'm going to pick out is monitoring implementation. Now, one of the things that we're very keen to ensure that we do this year is hold ourselves good on our promises that we delivered against last year. We delivered a number of good practices and ways in which we can make information available, particularly through Workstream 2. And we also had a look at, we also delivered some work around methodologies and procurement processes in 1. Now we're looking now to monitor and hold to account the network operators for implementing convergence and standardization across this good practice across all of the network operators. So the last thing we want is for our good practices to be a manual that goes and sits on a shelf gathering dust. What we're doing is we're ensuring that they're being taken into account. And actually, the DOs are also being held to account for that in their EYES plans and taking into account the feedback from stakeholders as part of this, because the expectation is, obviously, if we deliver these good practices, that they're put into place and into implementation. So I think the majority of these are in place or are in the very last throes of implementation across the DOs, and what we do is build the evidence base and be true to our promise here. So that, I think, is an important additional element of work that we're going to do this year. To conclude, reiteration of the consultation questions we've got out there. I think everybody's had highlighted the elements that apply to them through the presentation today. Really important in sort of questions 1 to 3. What are the key priorities? Please tell us your key priorities and whether we've missed anything. Question 4, what you believe in the consultations. Have we struck that balance on the number of consultations? Mark asked about question 7 around whole systems, whole energy systems. Very keen to get your input into that. And then the last 3 questions is very much around stakeholder engagement and how you would like to provide input or continue to be informed about what we're doing in our program. So those are the broad categories of questions that we've got. So it takes us to a last opportunity in a few minutes to answer any further Q&As across any of the topics we've covered today. If anyone would like to post anything in the Q&A boxes. Pause as people catch up or do some typing. Okay. That's good. Hopefully everybody is crystal clear on what we're setting out in our program and work and what we're asking from you. And I think the last thing I would do is say thank you all for your attention. We've had a significant number of participants on this call, and hopefully this will help you to understand what we're doing and provide input. And I would really encourage all of you to provide us with as much input as you can, because it will influence what we do this year. I'll have a brew as well, please, Mike. Thank you all for your attention. We will now close the WebEx and we look forward to all your responses. Thanks.